Hello and welcome to Hot Meeples. My name is Jay Sears and I'm joined with Sarah Shah from Board Games in a Minute. Welcome, Sarah.
Hi.
Hi, and today we're going to be taking a look at three hot topics where we draw them out of this bowl and then we discuss them, giving you our viewpoints. Now, before we get started, please do consider subscribing to the channel and also give this video a like as well if you enjoy it. So, shall we get started, Sarah, and draw out the first question?
Yes.
Yeah, fantastic. So let's see what comes out first. So the first question is, what are your thoughts on bigger board game companies acquiring the smaller ones?
Yes, that makes me sad. On the one hand, I can, I guess it's well, I would want to know the deals of the acquisition. As a lawyer, my mind immediately is like wondering what all the terms are, like what all the terms of the acquisition are, rather. Because if it's just completely taking over and you lose the mission of the smaller company, like for example, look at what happened with Asmodee just taking over so many smaller companies. And then I saw that a lot of people who went to Gen Con were complaining about how dead, like sterile the Asmodee booth looks. Like it just looks very like corporate, like it has no feel to it. Like, people were going to the Asmodee booth, which is a huge section because they've taken over so much of the board game industry. And a lot of people were like, not every game was on sale. They couldn't even like tell what was on sale. It just like looked like a very sterile, unfriendly, unwelcoming place. And, I feel like if bigger and bigger companies keep on taking over smaller ones, that's what you're going to see more of. And it's just going to take away from the enjoyment of the hobby, I think. And you might lose, more of that indie feel, that, creative feeling that we see and love. I don't know. It's just, I think it's sad.
Yeah, I suppose sometimes you can feel you can lose that personal touch, can't you? Is with smaller companies when they turn into larger companies or they're acquired by larger companies. And sometimes that family feel goes out the window. And naturally, that happens with larger businesses when they take over. It does become corporate. That's actually what happens. It's a business at the end of the day, so they're there to make money. But yeah, that personal touch just go away. And sometimes certain games that might be in the pipeline are then put to the side or put in the bin because they've got their own ideas as well, which can be disappointing for some people. But that's just the way the world is. I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing because sometimes that can help a small game company become a bigger thing than what it actually intended to be or what it was trying to be. So it takes away some barriers as well. So I think it can be a positive, but there's also a negative side to that as well. We lose that human touch sometimes. It becomes robotic because they have to operate as a business. So they have to find ways of doing that. And sometimes it does become corporate and robotic in the process of how they do things. But then again, it takes away that personal touch a lot of the time. The other positives are that you can then start seeing more board games coming out. And sometimes production can be better as well. So there are positives, but the negatives are sometimes when you start seeing smaller companies being taken over, then competition becomes less and then it becomes more monopolized, which that can cause problems as well, which then turns into potentially greed more than actual quality or looking at what the customer needs are and focusing more on money. So that can be a con as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's definitely the case with Asmodee, which is humongous. Like Asmodee is huge and taking over all of these small companies. And I'm just worried about, them monopolizing the industry and making it harder for smaller publishers and stuff. Yeah. And I wonder if smaller publishers do feel pressured to sell to Asmodee. Like I know that there was a publisher called Pearl Games, whose games I really enjoyed, like really nice games like The Bloody Inn or Le Fatan, small games like that. And they had, been bought by Asmodee, but then Asmodee later decided to, to stop, publishing their games, and then, now they're gone. So Pearl Games is now gone. And, I always wonder what would have happened if they never came under Asmodee. Would they have been able to continue and maybe instead crowdfund their games instead of have straight to retail games? I don't know.
Yeah, there's a risk to them as well because you can turn out to be like Haba and go bust and then go bankrupt and having to just draw back everything you're doing and focus on one and hoping the administrator comes and buys you out. So there's a risk as well for the likes of Asmodee that can become too big if they're too greedy as well and they can fold. So this is what happens in any industry, and I think we'll see a lot more of it happening. I think there'll be less and less small board game publishers, but that's just the way it is. I just hope that it doesn't focus too much on the money and it still puts the customer first. That's my priority, and I hope that that happens.
Actually, now that you mentioned that, I think that's another downside. Like it's when you become so big and you are a monopoly like Asmodee, look at the terms of, getting replacement parts or returning games. Like, the customer service is definitely going to be lacking when you are such a huge company. Like I've heard of many people complaining about the policy about trying to get replacement parts or trying to return games. So that's another huge thing to consider.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. I reckon it will only get worse. I think there'll be other smaller companies that will either go under
Yeah.
or be taken over. It's going to happen. It's
Yeah.
inevitable in business. We'll just have to see what happens, and hopefully these larger companies do try and prioritize the customers over money. But like any business, they've got to make money somehow. So I just hope they don't do a HABA and reduce the product quality to absolutely shocking and diabolical and actually focus on the customer. But we will see, we will see. So let's move in to our next one, Sarah, and let's see
Yes.
what comes out the bowl. So for the second question, we have got how far is too far when apps are integrated into board games?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the reason I play board games is because I like the tactile nature of them. I like sitting around and playing games with people. I don't mind using apps for certain things. Like for deduction games, it can be okay because, a computer can obviously generate, hundreds of thousands, of scenarios or puzzles for you for a deduction game. So if you need to use an app to just figure out, okay, which pieces or tiles or cards you need for this one particular deduction game, I think that that's perfectly fine, right? But if you're using an app for like anything more than that, then I am not a fan because then I feel like it's just moving away from being a board game and moving into being like an actual digital game. Like, I want to keep the nature of the game, but I can understand like, that apps and computers can be really useful for generating a puzzle or a story or something like that, but I don't want it to be the main focus. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to give a bit of context before I answer this because now I love my tech, but I also like the nostalgia. Okay, and I remember when videos, we used to have Love Film in the UK and it was in the US as well. And I used to love just getting the videos from the post and then stick it in my DVD player. I just loved that feeling. Or going down to the video shop and seeing what I wanted for the night. When they took that away and it was all digital, I hated it because that nostalgia feel. And it's very similar to board games where if you're using an app, I personally hate it. I want to get away from technology. I want that space to be with my friends or my family. I want to enjoy that tactile experience. I don't want a digital front to be dictating what I'm doing or perhaps what cards are coming out or whatever it might be when it's integrated. Now, I remember a couple of games, Chronicles of Crime, it uses the app. I personally don't like the game because it uses that too much. I've got a couple of the games such as I'm trying to look in here. So Lords of the Rings, the Journey to Middle Earth uses an app. I personally don't like it, and I know they've done it to streamline it, just like they've done in Descent 2, the second edition, because what they're trying to do is streamline the cards to make sure you're not fiddling about with the cards. And you still get your own cards, but the way you actually attack the enemies, it calculates everything for you, so you don't have to calculate it. So that's handy, but I personally don't like it because I'm in the app too much. So I'm constantly in the app to work out, okay, if I defeat this monster or not, I find it a bit frustrating, or I just flip a card over and work it out myself. So I personally feel it takes away from that tactile experience, or for me, that fun experience, because now I'm in an app that's doing a bit of control for me. I don't like that. I like to have everything in front of me. So I personally like it. I have to go into a menu, I have to press this button to then reveal this and do this. I don't like it. Now I know a lot of people are different in this viewpoint because they like it because that streamlinedness, or perhaps it cuts down a lot of time and work. I'd rather have that time and work to have that tactile feel and actually do it myself. And to me, it's just fun. It's more fun than using an app. It has its place, but it just isn't for me. And I try and avoid games that use an app. And someone suggested Lord of the Rings, The Journey to Middle Earth, and it uses an app. I thought I'll give it a try. I played it a couple of times. I hate it because it uses the app. I just don't like it. And I'm thinking of getting rid of it to get the very first version just to have all the cards.
Yeah, I think the only games I have that use an app are like the deduction ones, like the Search for Planet X and Awkward Guess. And again, they use an app because you can check and see whether you're right or something like that. So again, I think for games like those, I'm okay with it, and that's the extent of app usage I want in a board game is for deduction games, simply to, see which cards I might need for a new puzzle or to check an answer. I think that is the extent of it. But otherwise, like the Search for Planet X is still a tactile game for the most part. You're still moving around your piece and deciding, okay, which sector you want to go to and this and that. That one. So I'm okay in for that. But beyond that, I would not want to use an app. No.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see what the views of other people are and how many actually games have got a use app integration for the board games. And I'd be interested. I don't even know what the stats are. I don't think there's many games that actually use apps. They're very far and few between. But yeah, for me, it just takes away from that experience, and that's not for me. Especially when you're playing a game with children as well, and you're trying to get your children off the devices. I just
Yeah.
don't think it's a good idea introducing that. Like, let's move into our final one, Sarah, and let's see what comes out. So for our third question, will GameFound ever be as successful as Kickstarter in providing a platform to release board games?
I think that's a really interesting question. I don't think so. The reason is because, like, look at Twitter, for example, right? So Twitter had this huge following already. And then when Elon Musk took over, all these people were like, oh, we're going to leave Twitter. And then, Blue Sky came about, and everyone was like, in the board game industry, so many people were like, oh, we're going to transfer over to Blue Sky and we're not going to use Twitter anymore. If you look at all the people who said that, they're still all on Twitter. Like, even though they hate Elon Musk, they're still posting primarily on Twitter. When something becomes so ingrained in a certain culture or society, regardless of how terrible you think it's going in, like the direction it's going in, it's really hard to get away from that when it's really well established. Like Facebook, for example, how many other social media sites have come out trying to rival Facebook? Trying to rival Twitter. So now trying to rival Kickstarter. Like Kickstarter has been there since the beginning. It's a platform that most companies have been using since the beginning. It's the most well known. I think it's going to be really hard for GameFound to reach the level of Kickstarter or, become the primary platform for publishers to use. That's just my own personal opinion, but that's what I think.
Yeah, you're right. There's two things to think about. When someone starts so early, it's really hard for another company to come in later on and try and take over. Secondly, when you look at history, when new starters have come up, they normally fail and they're not as successful as those who've been around for a long time. So yeah, I don't think GameFound will be anywhere near as big as Kickstarter when it comes to selling board games. I just can't see it as a platform for that. I think what will happen is as GameFound introduce new things, I think what will happen is Kickstarter look at that and go, great, we'll copy that and we'll do something similar. And I think
Yeah.
they'll still be the big daddy of crowdfunding. And I think that will always be the case. I think GameFound have done well to get to where they are, but I honestly don't see they're going to get anywhere near as big as Kickstarter. I just can't see it.
Yeah.
It's just the way it is. It's the way in any business. When somebody's been around for a long time, look at Google, for example, as a search engine. They're by far one of the biggest, the biggest there for search engines. There's a couple, there's another one in China, which is actually bigger, but there we go. That's in China. But in the wholesale of things, you'll find that large companies, whether it's a soft drinks company, whatever it might be, they've always been at the top of the hill. And I think they'll stay there unless something happens and they go bankrupt. So yeah, I can't see GameFound ever getting anywhere near Kickstarter. I just can't see it happening.
No. And it's interesting that you mentioned that if Kickstarter sees something that GameFound is doing, they'll just be like, oh, okay, the board game industry wants this. We should do this too. Like, I think I've already kind of seen that. Like, I noticed a few weeks ago, Kickstarter was offering a class about how to, get your campaign noticed and like tips and tricks and for people who want to publish and this and that. And I was like, oh, that's interesting because I think I recall GameFound offering something like that, or I might be thinking of some other website. But I know that certain platforms try to offer these classes now and then, or these like seminars to just kind of teach people who are trying to publish, self-publish their games. But yeah, I think Kickstarter, knowing that GameFound exists, is going to keep an eye on it and see what board gaming publishers want, and will keep on evolving to stay on top. Yeah.
Yeah, there's been a couple of things. I think there's one on the tax, about calculates tax in different countries. I can't remember if it's GameFound who have developed that, but I think it's Kickstarter saying, well, we'll try and do the same. So I think that inevitably that's going to happen, and vice versa. GameFound will take ideas from Kickstarter. Naturally, that's what happens. But yeah, I think it's good to have another platform, and especially something that's dedicated to the board game industry. But I think we just need to accept that Kickstarter is going to stay and it's going to grow, and I just can't see another platform rivaling it. I just can't see it. But that's just where we're at. But all credit to GameFound for getting to where they're at, and I just wish them all the best success, but I just can't see it reaching to the heights of Kickstarter. But I suppose they can only wish and hope. So that brings us to the end, Sarah. I'd like to thank you for coming on, and I hope our viewers enjoyed that. And please do consider subscribing to the channel. And I'll put Sarah's link for her channel in the description for board games in a minute. So please do head down to the description and it'll take you straight there. And please do consider giving this video a like if you've enjoyed it. And that takes us to the end. I'd like to thank you for watching, and until next time, take care.
Bye.
This is Bonkers.